So today we're gonna dive into the consulting process, and Liang already gave us a quick overview, and yeah, let's see if that fits with my ideas and the ideas and theory. So the overall core phases are sales. Let me take laser pointer. It's sales, delivery, and after sales. And we can divide these core process steps into smaller steps, like the acquisition, which is part of sales, the analysis, solution design, and implementation. And you will find all this already on the slides about the areas and the tasks. And the after sales is mostly about customer care and customer development, of course. So we will dive deeper into this. So the acquisition is to make contact and to gather information. And it also includes the bidding process and the contract design. And the analysis includes the as-is analysis, of course, but also the target setting. So what is the main target, maybe on a higher level, because you go deeper with every step. Yeah. Then when it is clear what the as-is situation is and what the target, then you are able to design the solution and the to-be concept. And if you know that, what's wanted in the future, a new process, a new structure, a new IT solution, then you can go further into the planning of the realization. And in the implementation phase, the realization of this to-be concept, the controlling and evaluation will take place. And the last step includes service and support and customer development. So let's go deeper as well here. So we're going to do it like with a like on a stair. The acquisition phase, which is part of the core process step sales, as I already said, is divided into different steps, from making contact, about information gathering, bidding process, and they include also several options. So making contact can be working inbound or outbound, or it's an official tender process. So who knows what inbound and outbound, what's the difference in the sales activity? What's inbound and what's outbound contact? Someone has an idea? Who has an idea? Lee, maybe you an idea what's inbound and outbound contact? Is inside.
Yes.
Okay, Chen already. So what do you want to say?
I'm not sure. Is that about? Is that about the contact within your company and outside of your company?
Again, I didn't get it. Sorry.
Is that a contact within your company and outside of your company?
You mean inbound would be, as Chen also said, would be inside the company, and outbound more outside, or?
Yeah.
No, but you're not. It's not so far away. The in and the out already says if it's going inside into or out of. So that means inbound means if a customer is calling you and says, "Oh, I'm interested in your consulting support. Please help."
Okay.
And
Got
outbound
it.
means
Outbound means you offer the information to the customer.
in a first step. That means you are calling the customer. You are calling and saying,
Yeah.
"Hey, I'm from McKinsey and I'm offering strategy consulting. So are you interested?" Yeah. So in a pretty easy way. Of course, you do this acquisition in a more customized way, but in general, it is as I just explained. Yeah, in the inbound version, there's also the option of inbound service and outbound service, but in sales, it's usually a combination. You need options to receive and to increase your inbound contacts. That means, for example, marketing campaigns, your website, and so on. Reasons why a customer would notice you and call you with a requirement, something. But you usually also have to add some outbound activities. That means cold calling possible and potential clients, and offer your services to them or like that. And the official tender processes, have you ever heard, all of you, about bids and tender processes? Bids and tender processes. That means that a client has a consulting project to manage, and they have an order they want to give to a consulting company, but they don't want to choose them just by checking their websites and asking about prices or something like that. It is that they send a list of requirements regarding their needs to different companies, consulting companies, and they have to create an offer. Yeah, they have to tell them, for example, if that they meet the requirements and what the expected timeline is, and so on. So usually, of course, inbound and outbound also leads to an offer made by the consulting company, but the official tender process, in general, goes a bit deeper. So they are talking about more differentiated requirements. And you have, for example, I write it in the chat, the request for information is usually the first step. It's called RFI, request for information. And the second step is the RFP. It goes more deeper and it's more realistic and less high level. It's the request for proposal. This is where you offer a binding offer. The RFI is just that you're giving some information, but if you then in the second step receive deeper and more detailed information given by the client, then you can adapt your offer and make it more precise. And this leads to a proposal. Yeah, this is usually contractual binding. And sometimes we also talk about RFX. That includes both RFIs and RFPs. Okay. So information gathering can happen by personal contact, by phone call, by meetings. You can talk to your clients or also reference persons and so on. And of course, you can do some external and maybe also already internal data research. Sometimes in an official tender process, you will receive already some data given by the client, so you can optimize and individualize your offer. And yeah, the bidding process itself, if you create an offer, you of course you have to understand the situation of the client and the problem, you have to describe it, you have to you find words to describe the high-level target setting, what's the idea, how it should look like in the future. You have to describe your services, responsibilities, and timelines. And the more you know, the more information you have, the better, and the more detailed information you can give. And this also leads to a more precise fee and rate creation. Yeah. Okay. So the analysis. So let's say after this step you made it. So you received an order by the client, purchase order, and the client contracted you. That means you do have the consulting job. Whatever it is, if it's a strategic consulting job, an IT job, HR, that doesn't matter. This is here more on a general level. When you receive the purchase order, or also called PO, by the client, when you're contracted, you're going to start with your real business. But everything you did before, you did on a more detailed level. That's pretty important what you do before this analysis, because as I already said, your pricing usually is will be defined here in this first step, and it will be more precise, as I said, and realistic. Also your efforts, of course, how many days and hours you will need, the more you know. Then you're going to go into the deep dive of the as-is situation. You can do some interviews or surveys with your client. You can do observation and monitoring. This is pretty important when we are talking about processes. Usually it's a combination. For example, if you want to know how the recruitment process is working in a company, then you send a consultant or a consultant team to the recruiting team, of course, or the client, and they will ask them about the process steps. And sometimes they will just sit together with them while they receive an application of a potential candidate, and they will observe or monitor what the team member of the client is doing with this application. He will save it on the SharePoint with a specific name, and he will add some data into their recruitment system and so on. And sometimes when you just do interviews, some important steps are missing. So it's really important to do a combination of talking to people and watching what they are doing. And of course, you can also do some data research internally and externally. In this analysis step, also you are doing a more detailed target setting. That means you are also talking about alternatives and giving some recommendations to the clients. And you have to point out some success factors. For example, usually it's very important that the client knows how much time the client's employees and project members have to work on this project, on this specific project, and at what dates specific decisions are required. Yeah, this has to be defined here as well. Any questions? Sorry. Then let's go to the next slide. It's a solution design. We already created the as-is design, or we did an as-is analysis and created and defined the target. And when this is clear, you can design the to-be concept. That means you create a new process or a new structure. You deeply define the technological requirements. Maybe you need specific fields in a software program or a specific workflow. You're gonna do this within the to-be concept. In reality, this first step and the second step often come together, because they are integrated into each other. You, for example, when you are here and you are designing the new process, you realize, oh, in the as-is analysis phase, I didn't document it or understand how the approval workflow for the onboarding of a new candidate is working. And so you go back to the step of the analysis. And so it's a mixture. Yeah. So don't take it too strong, but it's important that you do every of these steps, but you can mix them up. The realization planning takes place when the concept of what you want to do is done. Then you can think about the organization and the governance structure of a project. That means who is the project sponsor, who is the project leader, who is responsible for some specific work packages. But also here, sometimes you already defined some of these details, or often you already define some of these details already in the first step, when you are in the bidding process. You see here services, responsibilities, and timelines. Usually already define it on a higher level. And here you go a bit deeper. We are already talking about work packages and single tasks. And for example, taking a look at your project work, the level that you have to write a project report, that you have to do a project presentation and to create a handout, that would be part of your offer in the first step, in the sales process. And you would say, oh, it would take us like 4 weeks. And on this level here, with the work packages, milestones, and timelines, this is what we created in Trello. So you know at what date a specific work package or task has to be finished. Also, you do a risk analysis. This is pretty important here as well. You have to know what kind of risks and threats your project is facing or could face. And you have to think about how can you avoid risk, how can you create less risks, and if you cannot avoid some risks, how would you react if a risk really is happening? In the next step, you will see in the implementation that we will evaluate the success. And so therefore, it's important that you define the criteria of evaluation before. So only then you will be able to see if the results are matching. So if you have any questions, ask me. The implementation, so I'm a bit running through because I've got one video I want to watch with you at the end of the session. So the implementation phase includes the realization, the controlling during the realization, and the evaluation after the realization. So part of the realization, of course, is the project management and change management and maybe some coaching. This is on the methodological level, and the content or the specific tasks are, for example, IT configuration, development, testing, or if we're not into an IT project, if we're talking about processes or reorganization, then of course in this realization phase we do the change, and we try to realize a new process and bring people to work in a new way, or to work with different and new methods. The controlling includes, of course, the monitoring of the timeline, are milestones matched, and if we are in time, in budget, is the quality what we ask for, and what about the risks? Of course, risk management is also a specific part of the controlling. And as I already said, in the end of the project, when we realized the implementation, whatever we had to deliver, then we're going to do an evaluation of the process. So the method, how did the teamwork work? Did we were in time? If we were in time, did we meet the budget targets and so on? But we will also take a look at the specific result in the end. Is the IT solution what the customer asked for? Is the process what the customer asked for? And also we will take a look at the satisfaction of the customer in the end of the project and during the project. And the last part of the consulting process is the after sales. So it means the service and support. So you will give guidelines, you will offer maybe some kind of a help desk, especially in the first month after an implementation project. You have to do we called it hypercare, because the customer is not used to a new process, new structure, or IT solution. So there will be a lot of questions. And this also usually leads to some adaptations of processes and configurations, of course. And beside the support, we also have to focus as a consulting company on the customer development, because we want to hold them as a customer. And of course, we want to do some up and cross-selling. So we want to sell them more products and services. And therefore, we have to offer continuous improvement. That means to improve the processes step by step, and also to offer some kind of innovations. We will go through this next week, because I'm eager to show you the presentation. Next week we will, so these are the tools that are needed, or this is a handful of tools that are needed in a specific phase. Next week we will dive into these, and especially into business process modeling and project management. And in the session after, we will check other tools like communication techniques or presentation tools and so on. Any questions? No. Okay. I think so. Then let's go to the presentation. Let's see if it's working. No, of course not. We'll change it a different way. Okay, let me know if you can see and...
So put yourself in a hypothetical.
Can you hear the presentation?
Yeah, clear, quite clear.
just give me a thumb up. Ooh. No, this was wrong.
We are helping this university, which we will call.
Does it work with the sound?
Yes.
Okay, great. So let me know if something's not working.
U of X. Looks like a pretty cool campus too. So this university comes to us, U of X, and says we have a $25 million shortfall. So just take a second and think about what's your first reaction. What do you propose we do? Awesome. So this is one of the biggest shifts that happens in consulting. And it's something when I share with people, they're pretty shocked at how subtle but powerful this is. So the typical response is answers like, we can increase tuition, we can ask for more money from the state, we can cut costs on IT, right? These are just solutions, ideas to come up with. The problem is, this is not how we approach problems to get to a very rigorous answer of imagining all possibilities. So instead, we shift from solutions to the consulting approach, which starts with identifying the problem, coming up with hypotheses, doing analysis and research, and we'll go much more into this later in the course, and then you're going to get to recommendations. So what this does instead is comes up with a bunch of explanations, breaks down the problem in a way that makes sure you're looking at all the possible options, and then sets you on a path to verify which are going to be the most powerful levers to recommend to this University of X. So let's look a little more in depth at this University of X scenario. So let's say we do a little digging, and I'm just going to define the problem for you. I'll show you how we do this in more depth later in the course. But based on current estimates and spending obligations, U of X is facing a budget shortfall of $25 million. Based on requirements from the state, which you learned about, the only options they have are to close this gap through spending decreases or revenue increases, meaning they have to balance this shortfall. There is no option to have this on the books. So what would we do first? We'd come up with hypotheses. In this situation, there's two clear options outlined by the problem. U of X can either cut costs or U of X can increase the revenue it's taking in. And what's powerful about these is you want to make sure that your hypotheses are set up in a way that they can be turned into questions that you can assess and then do research into later. The next thing you want to do is develop sub-hypotheses. So for cut costs, you might start coming up with some questions like, could we cut the hours of service? Can we increase adjunct hiring? And for revenue, similarly, can we increase tuition? Can we increase fees and pass them on to students, etc.? So this is really the beginning process of a consulting project. You might frame out a bunch of questions. You're going to look at this in a very much more in-depth structured manner, which we'll cover later. But this is really how you frame the problem, and then you go off and do the research and deep dives that consultants get paid for. So let's say we're testing one of these type of hypotheses. So tuition hikes, what might we do? So in a consulting project, you might do a few things. You might start benchmarking comparable schools. Looks like we're a better value than most schools, so maybe there's some wiggle room to increase tuition. Survey the students. Looks like the students are strongly opposed. And number 3, you might look at the macro landscape of student debt issues and see where it all fits in. So this was a very quick run through of the kind of deep dive that might take months in a consulting project. So I just want to outline how some of these pieces might fit into the consulting process. The consulting process is very iterative. It's both top-down, some of the hypothesis structuring, the identifying the problem, and it's also bottoms up, where you're looking at the nitty-gritty data, the analysis, doing research, and trying to make sense of it all. So at the beginning phase, you might start coming up with a problem definition, then doing your hypotheses. And that's when you first go down, right? You might pick a couple of things just to test out, are we headed in the right direction? You might test to see, okay, can we actually do tuition hikes? You often learn a lot as part of that process. And that leads you to go back and question some of the hypotheses you come up with a better structuring for your project. And you'll go back and forth. As you get further in the consulting project or solving a problem more generally, you're going to tweak things, and it's going to get a little less dramatic each time, and hopefully closer to an alignment with a solution that you're finding through the analysis that is going to be communicated in a way that's going to be persuasive. And then finally, you're going to end and communicate top down. You're going to start where you're going to end where you started, and we're going to talk about this in the pyramid principle. So you're going to go deep into the data, and then work your way up and then communicate it top down. So start with the solutions, but this time the solutions you're starting with are backed with a pretty deep and rigorous consulting process.
Viele Menschen denken, dass Coaches und Berater.
Okay. So this was it for today. I will send you the link of the presentation via Slack as well, and give you one or two more questions just to think about what's special on this defined and designed consulting process. And yeah, we will talk about that further on Monday, and then we're going to dive into project management and process management. So, two students, as always, will be responsible for the repetition of this chapter. This does not include the video. It's without the video. And this time it is Lee and Chen Su. You are responsible for the next repetition. That means it includes the consulting process. So what's next on Monday? We have lessons on Monday. We're going to talk about your project work, as always, about project plan, timeline, and also about the content progress. Please talk to each other, talk about your mission, and align your mission and share your documents so you know where everybody's standing at the moment. Yeah, the repetition includes the process phases and steps, approaches and tasks, not the tools and methods. I will change that because we didn't talk about that. And the self-study is this YouTube video you've already seen, and I will send you to one or two more questions to think about a bit deeper. So, any questions at the moment?
All clear.
All clear. That's great. So then, have a nice afternoon or evening, and I wish you good progress with your project work and your other homeworks from other lessons, and we see each other on Monday.
Yeah.